Welcome to From Center Ice. My name is Courtney, and just like everybody expected, the Montreal Canadiens are Western Conference champions. Sounds weird, doesn't it? Welcome to 2021. But the point being, the Montreal Canadiens beat the Vegas Golden Knights in 6 games, and they are on to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time in 28 years. Their Stanley Cup Final drought is as old as I am, so that's fun. But they've broken it. They are off to the final because they just beat the Golden Knights by a score of 3-2 in overtime in Montreal in Game 6. All of their series so far have been different games. Round number 1, they beat Toronto in 7 games. Round number 2, they beat the Winnipeg Jets in 4 games. And now round number 3, they beat the Vegas Golden Knights in 6. They now await the winner of the series out east between the New York Islanders and the Tampa Bay Lightning. That one is going to a Game 7 because the Islanders won in Game 6 to force that final game. So we don't know who the Canadiens are facing next, but we do know what they have done so far. So let's go through the games that happened in this series against the Knights. Game number 1, the Vegas Golden Knights beat the Montreal Canadiens by a score of 4-1, and they just simply looked like the better team. After game number 1, it really wasn't looking good for the Habs. It looked like Vegas was just on their game. They had just beat the Avalanche. They were ready to go. They wanted to get to the Cup Final, and they were just going to blow through the Montreal Canadiens to get there. Clearly that didn't happen. And that's the only game of this series I watched in its entirety because I was rooting for the Montreal Canadiens to beat the Vegas Golden Knights, and I'm just a little bit superstitious when it comes to playoff hockey. So I figured I watched the game and they lost, then I wouldn't watch the game and obviously they would win, right? And that's exactly what they did in game number 2. The Montreal Canadiens beat Vegas by a score of 3-2, which is a common thread throughout this series. And they also did it in game number 3 by a score of 3-2. This time it was in overtime because if you recall, with the game winding down, Marc-Andre Fleury just... I don't know what he did actually, but the puck ended up in the front of the net, but he was not in the front of the net. Josh Anderson was in front of the net, and he put the puck into the back of the net to tie the game, sending it to overtime, and he scored the game-winning goal in that game as well. Again, I wasn't watching that one, but once that turnover happened, I got all sorts of notifications on my phone from Twitter saying, "Oh no, Marc-Andre Fleury." So I got very excited thinking, oh my gosh, there's chaos happening, this is fantastic. And then I saw the GIFs and the videos and the replays, and I went, oh no, Fleury. Because while I was rooting for Montreal to win this series, you can't watch a play like that unless you are a Habs fan and not just go, oh no, because that was rough. So then we have game number 4. This one is played on Father's Day. Robin Lehner is in net because, as we just talked about, Fleury had a not so good game number 3. And I am so sorry, Habs fans, but I watched part of this game. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw the end of the first period and I saw the whole second period. And the Vegas Golden Knights beat the Montreal Canadiens in overtime by a score of 2-1. I know, I am so sorry. So after the Montreal Canadiens had clawed their way back, if you will, from being down 1 game in a series, there's not much clawing to be done there, but just stick with me. After they did that and then hopped out to the 2-1 series lead, I made the mistake of watching part of the game, and then the series was tied 2-2. And that meant that the series went back to Vegas, and the Canadiens had to try to win a game in Vegas. That is a tough building to play in, but they didn't. I didn't watch it, and they won 4-1. Fleury was back in net for that one. So the Canadiens had a series lead of 3-2, going back to Montreal, going back to the Bell Center, playing in front of their fans. They had a chance to clinch the series and send themselves to the Stanley Cup Final, like I said, for the first time in 28 years, in front of their fans, in the Bell Center, in this building who has not seen fans all regular season. They finally were allowed back at the end of the first round and throughout the rest of the playoffs. It wasn't a full building, but it sounded like a full building. And no, I didn't watch the game, but once I saw the result, I turned it on. I wanted to see the handshake line. I just kind of like that thing. And the Montreal Canadiens beat the Vegas Golden Knights by a score of 3-2, and they won the series. Again, in front of their fans in Montreal. They had video footage from outside of the Bell Center, and it was just going nuts. But you just gotta feel good for them, and yes, it hurts because I'm still not over the first round. Clearly, this just means that the Toronto Maple Leafs would have gone to the Stanley Cup Final, so that's something I need to reconcile in my brain. Or not really, because I really don't think that that team would have done what the Montreal Canadiens have done so far in these playoffs. I think if they would have won the first round, maybe they would have gotten past Winnipeg, but I don't think they would have gotten past one of Colorado or Vegas, which turned out to be Vegas. But just let me have this, because you have the joy, I still have the pain, but I am rooting for your team, so just let me have it. So the Toronto Maple Leafs would have gone to the Stanley Cup Final, and yes, I need to reconcile that in my brain, but onward, because they were out in the first round after pathetic hockey. So I already went over one of the very bad moments in this series, which was, you know, the turnover for Fleury. It was bad for Vegas and for Fleury himself, very good for Habs fans. I mean, being a Chicago Blackhawks fan, first, when they played Tampa in the final in 2015, there was a goal that Patrick Sharp scored where Hedman ran into Ben Bishop, knocking him over. The net was just wide open. It probably kind of felt like that, and that is one of my favorite playoff goals of all time. So this might be yours as well, just because of what led up to it and how ridiculous it was. And Anderson's goal tied the game at the end of the third period, and again, he ended up winning it in overtime. That's just cool. But there were some good moments in this series for the Habs. I mean, you know, aside from the whole series win and going to the Stanley Cup Final. In game number 1 of this series against the Golden Knights, Cole Caufield scored his first NHL playoff goal. And he certainly wasn't done after that one, but we'll get there. And tonight, in game number 6, in overtime, Artturi Lehkonen scored his first career playoff overtime goal to send his team to the Cup Final. How cool is that? And he did it at home, in Montreal, in the Bell Center, in front of their own fans. Yes, with how long of a drought it's been to get to the final, and even if it hadn't been a drought, if he would have scored that goal in overtime, but in Vegas, it still would have felt amazing. Don't get me wrong, I know that. But being in Montreal, that's just special. And, like I said at the top, they're Western Conference champions. Because hockey. So let's take a look at the goalie stats for the 3 goaltenders who played in this series, and these stats are just going to be for the playoffs as a whole. Let's start with the 2 losers, get them out of the way, and since he played tonight, we will start with Robin Lehner. In the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs, he had a record of 1-2. He had a 3.63 goals against average and an .887 save percentage. Not great, but if you do recall, his first game of the playoffs was that absolute shelling against the Colorado Avalanche in game number 1, where he gave up 7 goals. Not all on him. That was just a bad game for Vegas all around. And then we have Marc-Andre Fleury. He played 16 games in the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs, and he had a record of 9-7. He had a 2.04 goals against average and a .918 save percentage, so definitely a lot better than Leonard, and he was absolutely lights out for most of the playoffs this year. It was just these final few games against Montreal where the cracks really started to show. Yeah, he didn't have his best games all playoff long, but for the majority, he was just a solid rock back there for the team. And that brings us to the winning goaltender, Carey Price. He is in the Stanley Cup Final. They have not updated his goals against average or his save percentage on the NHL app, but he's got a record of 12-5, and before this game, he had a 2.02 goals against average and a .933 save percentage. That's just otherworldly. He is tied for second for save percentage as a whole throughout these playoffs with Spencer Knight. There are 2 goaltenders tied for first, one of them being Andrei Vasilevsky. He's got a .934. Again, Price has a .933, so take that as you will. The other goaltender tied for number 1 in save percentage in this year's playoffs is Jack Campbell. He also had a .934 save percentage in round number 1 against these Montreal Canadiens. And he is also the goals against average leader with a 1.81 goals against average. I cannot escape the pain. I was just trying to look at goaltender stats, and here at number 1 you have Jack Campbell, and what happened to his team? They didn't show up for him. But we're talking about the Montreal Canadiens here, not that other team from Canada. So Carey Price has just been absolutely amazing all playoffs long. And if you recall, he came into the playoffs coming off of an injury, and he probably was still injured. And he just shut it down. He said, this team is going to win and I am going to make it happen. And now they're on to the Stanley Cup final. But before I close this out, let's look at who the goal scorers were in this series for both teams. Again, we'll start with the losers. The Vegas Golden Knights had 9 different goal scorers in this series. Alex Pietrangelo had 3. Nicholas Waugh and Alec Martinez had 2. And then with 1 goal apiece, we have Riley Smith, Max Pacioretty, Brayden McNabb, Shea Theodore, Mattias Janmark, and Nick Holden. So that gets the losers out of the way. Now on to the Montreal Canadiens, the victorious team in this series and in the Western Conference. The Habs had 10 different goal scorers, and this time we will start with who had 1 goal apiece. We've got Shea Weber, Artturi Lehkonen with a massive goal to be his only goal of the series, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Eric Staal, Nick Suzuki, Yoel Armia, and Tyler Toffoli. They all had 1 goal apiece. Now with 2 goals, we have Paul Byron and Josh Anderson. And the leading goal scorer for the Montreal Canadiens in round number 3 was Cole Caufield with 4. The rookie scored his first NHL playoff goal in game number 1 in this series in a losing effort. They lost 4-1 to Vegas, and he scored 4 goals throughout the whole series, and he was the leading goal scorer on either team. The future is bright for this kid, and so is his smile. So there you go. The Montreal Canadiens beat the Vegas Golden Knights, just like they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets. Now, like I said, they await whoever wins the series out east between the Islanders and the Lightning, and it'll be interesting no matter who it is. I look forward to seeing the matchup, but if you would like to hear more from me or from Center Ice, you can head on over to FromCenterIce.com. There's links to everywhere you can find us over there. If you're more of a social media person, the links to all of those platforms are down in the description for you. We just recorded another podcast episode last night. I am in the middle of editing that now, and I will finish it after I edit and post this video. But all of that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it, and Montreal Canadiens fans, have yourself a night. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye, guys. Thank you all for watching. Please hit that subscribe button to catch more From Center Ice content. If you could, hit the like button on this video, maybe share it with a friend or two. And while you're here, check out the podcast playlist and catch up on some old episodes. We will catch y'all next time. Bye!